What makes a Western unforgettable? For Clint Eastwood, the genre's living legend, it's not just about horses and showdowns, it's about morality, silence, regret, and redemption. These are the Westerns Eastwood insists every young director should study. Grab your notebook and saddle up. We're riding through 15 masterpieces that shaped the man behind Unforgiven and the outlaw Josie Wales. Shane, 1953. In Shane, Clint Eastwood saw the birth of a myth. George Stevens's masterpiece isn't just a Western, it's a parable about violence, virtue, and vanishing ideals. Shane, a weary gunslinger trying to hang up his gun, rides into a town where evil wears a suit and power hides behind a fence. He becomes a reluctant hero, not for glory, but because no one else will stand up. The film's quiet, lyrical tone and elegiac cinematography moved Eastwood deeply. It was Shane's climactic walk into the mountains, wounded, fading into legend, that Eastwood mirrored in Pale Rider. To him, Shane captured the loneliness of the gunslinger better than any dialogue ever could. Eastwood once said, "In Westerns, the most important lines are the ones that aren't spoken." In Shane, silence tells the whole story. High Noon, 1952. Clint Eastwood both admired and challenged High Noon. Gary Cooper plays Marshal Will Kane, a man abandoned by his town as danger approaches. The entire film unfolds in real time, turning every ticking clock into a drumbeat of dread. Eastwood found power in its structure, but took issue with its message. He believed a lawman shouldn't beg for help, he should stand on his own. That criticism inspired High Plains Drifter, his stark, supernatural response to High Noon. But admiration lingered. Eastwood appreciated Cooper's restrained desperation and how the film stripped away the romance of the Old West. For Eastwood, High Noon wasn't perfect, but it asked the right questions. What does courage really look like? Who stands with you when it matters most? And what if no one does? The Searchers, 1956. If Shane was poetry, The Searchers was Shakespeare. Directed by John Ford, it follows Ethan Edwards, a Civil War veteran hunting for his kidnapped niece. But Ethan isn't a noble rescuer. He's bitter, racist, and terrifyingly obsessive. Eastwood saw in John Wayne's performance a rawness rarely shown in Westerns. The landscapes were vast, but Ethan's soul felt small. The Searchers taught Eastwood that Westerns could hold contradictions, that a man could be heroic and broken, savior and destroyer. Unforgiven owes much to this blueprint. Both films ask whether a violent man can ever leave violence behind. And that final shot, Ethan standing outside the door, unable to enter the home he saved, stayed with Eastwood for decades. It reminded him that not all heroes ride into sunsets, some ride into exile. Red River, 1948. Howard Hawks's Red River pits father against son across the harsh terrain of a cattle drive. John Wayne plays Tom Dunson, a man hardened by loss, while Montgomery Clift, Eastwood's personal acting inspiration, portrays his idealistic surrogate son. Their conflict isn't just physical, it's philosophical. Can power be inherited without cruelty? Can the old ways yield to the new? Eastwood admired Hawks's ability to stage epic conflict without losing emotional intimacy. Every dust storm, every stampede felt personal. It's a film about ambition, control, and letting go. Lessons Eastwood would explore in Million Dollar Baby. He often credited Red River for showing him that Westerns could function as father-son dramas wrapped in action. The film ends not with a shootout, but a fistfight, two men wrestling with pride. That honesty, that lack of melodrama, inspired Eastwood's grounded humanist approach to storytelling. The Oxbow Incident, 1943. In The Oxbow Incident, Eastwood found a Western with the soul of a courtroom drama and the conscience of a tragedy. Set in a single night, the film follows a posse bent on lynching suspected cattle rustlers. Henry Fonda plays the voice of reason, but justice loses to vengeance. Eastwood praised its brutal honesty. There are no heroes here, only regret, as three innocent men are hanged by morning. This film burned into Eastwood's memory and shaped Unforgiven's moral framework. It dared to ask, what if the West wasn't about triumph but shame? Eastwood said it was one of the few films that treated violence as something irreversible, not heroic. The Oxbow Incident taught him that sometimes the most powerful moment in a Western is not the gunshot, but the silence that follows. The Wild Bunch, 1969. Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch didn't just change Westerns, it detonated them. Clint Eastwood admired its daring, even if he never fully embraced its ultraviolence. The film follows aging outlaws in a Mexico on the brink of revolution, walking headfirst into their doom with blood-soaked honor. Peckinpah's slow-motion shootouts were operatic and unapologetic. Eastwood was particularly drawn to the way the film tackled obsolescence, men out of step with a changing world, choosing to die on their own terms. Unforgiven owes a spiritual debt here. It shares the Wild Bunch's raw emotional undercurrent, that violence is neither noble nor clean, and that the West wasn't so much won as wasted. For Eastwood, this was a film that exposed the Western's broken myths and dared to ask what comes after the legend dies. Ride the High Country, 1962. Clint Eastwood has said Ride the High Country quietly says everything about honor. Directed by a young Sam Peckinpah before his bloodier fame, it stars Joel McCrea and Randolph Scott, aging cowboys on one last mission. What begins as a simple gold transport slowly becomes a moral reckoning between two men, one tempted by greed, the other clinging to old ideals. Eastwood found something sacred in its message. The line, "All I want is to enter my house justified," became a personal creed, echoed in his own Gran Torino. This film's muted palette and haunting final walk up the hill reminded Eastwood that endings don't need to explode. They just need to resonate. Ride the High Country proved that Westerns could be spiritual without being preachy and cinematic without needing spectacle. Winchester 73, 1950. Directed by Anthony Mann and starring James Stewart, Winchester 73 isn't just a Western, it's a noir with spurs. Eastwood admired how it redefined masculinity, using Stewart's uncharacteristic rage to fuel a tale of obsession. The film follows a prized rifle as it changes hands, from a sharpshooter to an outlaw to an Indian trader and back again, leaving a trail of death. Eastwood loved the metaphor, how violence, once unleashed, cannot be contained. Each new owner of the rifle represents a part of the American psyche: greed, revenge, justice. This rotating morality fascinated Eastwood, who borrowed that shifting lens for High Plains Drifter. He once said Winchester 73 taught him that a Western could be both epic and intimate, structured like a Greek tragedy but played in the dust. My Darling Clementine, 1946. John Ford's My Darling Clementine isn't your typical gunfight at the OK Corral tale. It's poetic, meandering, and surprisingly introspective. Clint Eastwood called it a painting in motion. He was struck by its use of silence, wide-open space, and long shadows to tell the story of Wyatt Earp and Doc Holliday. Henry Fonda's Earp is thoughtful, almost reluctant, and Victor Mature's Holliday is a doomed romantic, both casting long shadows of influence on Eastwood's own stoic protagonists. He admired how Ford resisted action for character, letting moments breathe. In My Darling Clementine, Eastwood saw how restraint could be more powerful than spectacle. It showed him that the soul of the Western wasn't the shootout, but what came before and after. Oneeyed Jacks, 1961. This was Marlon Brando's only directorial effort, and a film Eastwood quietly admired for its ambition and chaos. Oneeyed Jacks tells the story of Rio, a betrayed outlaw seeking revenge on his former partner, now a lawman. The film went wildly over budget and schedule, but Eastwood respected Brando's bold vision. He saw in it an aching vulnerability beneath the vengeance, something rarely shown in male Western leads. The oceanfront setting gave it a windswept melancholy, far from the dusty deserts of John Ford. Eastwood borrowed its themes of betrayal and internal conflict for the outlaw Josie Wales, where enemies become reluctant allies and rage gives way to grace. Oneeyed Jacks reminded Eastwood that even if a Western is messy, it can still be unforgettable if it dares to go deeper than the gun. The Gunfighter, 1950. If there's one Western Clint Eastwood believes every filmmaker should study for character introspection, it's The Gunfighter. Gregory Peck plays Jimmy Ringo, a legendary gunslinger weary of killing and desperate for redemption. But no matter how far he runs, his reputation rides ahead of him. Every young buck with a pistol wants to be the man who took down Ringo. Eastwood loved the film's melancholy pacing and stripped-down set, most of it unfolding in a single saloon. It wasn't about the shootout, it was about waiting for one. He admired how the film trapped its hero in a town that reflected his own inner prison. The Gunfighter taught Eastwood the power of quiet dread. It's why in Unforgiven you feel the burden on William Money's shoulders before he even fires a shot. What struck Eastwood most was the tragedy. A man seeking peace, but doomed to die by the legend he never asked for. It's a film about time running out, and the impossibility of escape in a world built on myth. For young directors, Eastwood says this is the lesson. You can build suspense not through noise, but through inevitability. Hombre, 1967. Clint Eastwood has always admired Hombre for what it said and what it refused to say. Directed by Martin Ritt and starring Paul Newman, this Western flips every convention on its head. Newman plays John Russell, a white man raised by Apaches who is rejected by both societies. When stagecoach passengers are ambushed, it's Russell they expect to save them. But he doesn't play hero. He listens, he watches, he waits. Eastwood saw Hombre as a masterclass in restraint. Newman's stoicism inspired Eastwood's own performances. Understated, emotionally loaded, often silent. But it was more than that. Hombre boldly tackled racism, class division, and moral compromise. Russell isn't likable. He's real. And that's what Eastwood admired, the refusal to glamorize heroism. For Eastwood, the takeaway was profound. Being a director doesn't mean shouting your theme. Sometimes it means whispering it through character. Hombre doesn't try to entertain. It dares you to feel uncomfortable. It dares you to think. That, Eastwood believes, is what makes a Western and a filmmaker unforgettable. The Big Country, 1958. In The Big Country, Clint Eastwood found a Western that challenged masculinity in ways few others dared. Directed by William Wyler and starring Gregory Peck, the film follows a pacifist Easterner who refuses to be drawn into a feud between two ranching families. While others ride tall, shout loud, and draw fast, Peck's character walks away from conflict, again and again. At first, it's seen as cowardice. But over time, his quiet defiance becomes the most powerful weapon in the film. Eastwood was fascinated by this reversal of Western norms. The hero doesn't fight to prove himself. He refuses to. And still, he wins. The vast landscapes, long silences, and moral dilemmas resonated deeply with Eastwood. He saw in The Big Country a lesson young directors often forget. You don't need violence to create tension. You need principle. And Peck's performance, underplayed and unyielding, taught Eastwood that courage often hides behind humility. He borrowed this lesson for films like $1 Million Baby, where the strongest characters aren't those who punch hardest, but those who refuse to throw a punch at all. For Eastwood, The Big Country proves that restraint, not bravado, is the true frontier. The Professionals, 1966. Eastwood called The Professionals one of the smartest, leanest action westerns ever made. Directed by Richard Brooks, the film follows a team of mercenaries hired to rescue a kidnapped woman from Mexican revolutionaries. But the plot thickens when they realize she doesn't want to be saved. What fascinated Eastwood was how every character in The Professionals lived by a code, but each code was different. Burt Lancaster's gunslinger, Lee Marvin's tactician, and Robert Ryan's horse wrangler all carry invisible wounds. They don't speak in monologues. They speak in deeds. Eastwood took this to heart. He admired how the film trusted its audience to piece together motives and loyalty through action. There's wit, grit, and emotional subtext under every line. And like in Eastwood's own The Outlaw Josey Wales, The Professionals is about men haunted by war and betrayal, navigating a world where the line between good and evil isn't just blurred, it's been erased. For Eastwood, this film taught that style without substance fades, but substance with style? That's unforgettable. 7 Men from Now, 1956. Clint Eastwood often pointed to Seven Men from Now as a hidden gem that every young director must discover. Directed by Bud Boticher and starring Randolph Scott, the film follows a former sheriff tracking down the 7 men who murdered his wife during a robbery. What starts as a revenge plot becomes a study in guilt, stoicism, and honor. Boticher's minimalist style thrilled Eastwood. Sparse dialogue, no wasted shots, a tight script that let atmosphere carry the tension. Eastwood learned that you don't need 20 characters or a sprawling runtime, just a man, a mission, and the weight of memory. The sheriff doesn't just want vengeance, he's trying to forgive himself. The landscape is vast, but the story is intimate. 7 Men from Now helped shape Eastwood's approach in Pale Rider and Gran Torino, tales of haunted men quietly trying to right their pasts. For Eastwood, this film whispered the loudest truth. Sometimes the most powerful Western isn't about the 7 men out there, but the one ghost riding with you. These 15 Westerns aren't just dusty relics, they're blueprints for powerful storytelling. Clint Eastwood didn't just watch them, he absorbed them, lived them, and remade them in his own image. If you're serious about directing, start here and ride with purpose.